Schaeffer's apologetic method. My sense is for Schaeffer, it's not true that he didn't have a method, right? I think what Schaeffer was eschewing, rightly, was the debates over which method is most biblical or most reformed or most whatever. That was kind of a hallmark of that moment in time. Schaeffer, I think, my sense is, and I can be right or wrong, my sense is of reading Schaeffer, listening to lectures, bumping around L'Abri, that's my barometer. Schaeffer's project was basically Van Tilian, basically presuppositional, but being form-fitted to individuals that he met. And over time, he began to see that as much as every individual must be given their due, their place, their proper moment in question, that he could begin to hear familiar themes, longings, concerns, objections. And my sense is that Schaeffer took Van Til's basic methodology, but began to kind of tweak it in terms of the responses that he was getting to an increased number of apologetic encounters. So if you think of Schaeffer's taking the roof off, I think what Schaeffer's trying to do there is really to let the challenge of God's revelation, of God, the biblical worldview, come home. But he also gives warning, we don't want to paint these guys into a corner. We must give the non-Christian a place to retreat. And a lot of Van Til guys and others were like, what's he doing? He's letting them off the hook. Well, I think, how do you respond when you're painted into a corner? I know how I respond. It's not pretty. And I think Schaeffer, practically, psychologically, emotionally, whatever you want to say, I think Schaeffer was recognizing, transcendentally, presuppositionally, I can wrap this guy up in knots right now. I can show him that his worldview is inconsistent, illogical, without foundation. But what is that going to do to him as a person? He's not going to respond, well, thank you, Dr. Schaeffer, for showing me how illogical I am. He'll push back, he'll resist. I think Schaeffer was just operating at a level of kind of basic courtesy. In one sense, Schaeffer's is a do unto others apologetic. I don't think that's less than Van Til, quite frankly. Van Til has an ultimate starting point, the triune God, the ontological Trinity, and as it revealed in Scripture. But in practice, Van Til has proximate starting points. Because we're all made in God's image and we all live in God's world and we're all surrounded by God's revelation of himself, there is nowhere to which we can sidestep or remove ourselves from God. And so I can start anywhere. Metaphysically, we have all things in common. All right? So at that point, Schaeffer's very Van Tilian. He starts wherever the man or the woman is. He recognizes a very generous common ground, as he was taught to do. As for his classical arguments, Van Til says, this is where it gets really weird, Van Til's not an anti-evidentialist either. Van Til, I've got the syllabus, Van Til taught classes on evidences at Westminster Seminary in the 30s and the 40s. Okay? Van Til's concern had to do with the noetic effects of sin, the epistemological naivete that people employed these arguments with. Van Til disagreed with Thomas Aquinas over the nature of the fall kind of thing and what that's done to us. But Van Til says that perhaps these arguments, these classical arguments, can be reconstructed on a more robust biblical line. Potentially that's what Schaeffer was trying to do. Maybe Schaeffer was just trying to do what Van Til suggested could be done. Now, I want to be careful. I'm not trying to intuit Schaeffer's thinking, and I'm not trying to kind of lay down a project and foist it on Schaeffer. But historically, both Schaeffer and Van Til, there's a lot more nuance going on than subsequent generations have admitted to or worked with. I think Schaeffer is a modified presuppositionalist who takes the basic insights of Van Til and says, let's road test these. Let's see what happens when we do this. And the more he road tested, the more he tweaked. and adjusted. And I think that was what Schaeffer was doing. He was a work in progress. And when Schaeffer says, look, I'm not a philosopher, I'm not an apologist, I'm really just an evangelist, I don't think Schaeffer was being coy. I think he was being honest. And we should take him at his word and read him as an evangelist.